The gun wasn't pointed at her face yet, but Catalina could see the officer's hand hovering near his holster, fingers twitching, eyes scanning her like she was prey. She hadn't moved, hadn't even breathed wrong. 1 second, she was closing her trunk. Organic apples, almond milk, the normal Tuesday routine. The next, a knee was driving into her spine, asphalt scraping her cheek, metal cuffs biting into her wrists so tight she felt her pulse hammering against steel. "I said don't move." She wasn't moving. Around them, phones lifted, strangers gasped, a woman screamed. Officer Derek Brennan saw a black woman in a $90,000 Audi and made a decision that would destroy his life in 72 hours. What he didn't see? The platinum ring on her finger, engraved with a name that made cops retire early and prosecutors drop cases. Catalina Volkov, a wife of the most dangerous man in the city. And Brennan just made her his enemy. This is what happens when you touch what belongs to a king. 20 minutes earlier. Nikolai's hand traced the curve of Catalina's hip as morning light cut through their bedroom curtains. "Stay home today," he murmured against her neck, voice rough with sleep and something darker. That edge of possessiveness that made her skin flush. 8 years of marriage, and he still touched her like she might disappear. Catalina smiled, turning in his arms. "You trying to keep me prisoner, Mr. Volkov?" His eyes, cold gray that could freeze a man mid-sentence, softened just for her. "Would you mind?" She kissed him. Slow. Deep. The kind that promised later. "I'm just getting groceries. I'll be back before you finish your conference call with the Bratva." Nikolai's jaw tightened. He hated when she said that word out loud, even in their bedroom where every surface was swept for bugs twice a week. But he didn't correct her. He never did. Because Catalina wasn't like the other wives in their world, the ones who pretended not to know, who smiled at charity galas and never asked where the money came from. She knew exactly who she married. A man who controlled half the city's ports, who made politicians sweat with a single phone call, whose enemies had a habit of vanishing before trials ever started. And she loved him anyway. Not despite the danger. Because of it. "Be careful," Nikolai said, releasing her reluctantly. Catalina pulled on jeans and a fitted black sweater. Casual, normal. The kind of outfit that let her disappear into the civilian world she still belonged to. "Always am." She grabbed her keys, kissed him one more time, and walked out the door, not knowing she'd be in handcuffs before she made it home. Want to know what really happened? Keep watching, because the next 60 seconds change everything. Trader Joe's parking lot. 2:47 p.m. Catalina loaded the last bag. Pasta, vegetables, that expensive almond milk Nikolai pretended not to like, but drank anyway. The sun was warm. Birds chirped. Somewhere, a kid laughed. Perfect. Then a car door slammed. Not normal. Too aggressive. Too close. Catalina's pulse spiked. Instinct inherited from a mother who survived ice raids and a father who taught her to always know the exits. The patrol car didn't pull into a space. It stopped directly behind her Audi. Blocked her in. Engine idling. Predatory. Catalina's hand froze on the trunk, every muscle suddenly aware, suddenly calculating. Training kicked in. Not from Nikolai, from before Nikolai, from being her father's daughter, from learning at 16 that compliance keeps you alive and resistance gets you buried. She made herself small, hands visible, non-threatening, counted the witnesses, mapped the cameras, noted the exits, heavy boots on pavement, radio crackle. Then, step away from the vehicle, hands where I can see them, now. Not a request, an accusation wearing a badge. Catalina turned slowly, movements deliberate, hands empty. But her heart was screaming because she already knew. This wasn't about groceries. This was about skin. Officer Derek Brennan, 34, 6'2", 9 years on the force, approached with his hand near his weapon. His eyes held no curiosity, no hesitation, just certainty. The kind that destroys lives before questions are asked. Around them, the parking lot continued like nothing had changed. A woman pushed a stroller. A man returned a cart. But everything had changed, and Catalina Volkov stood perfectly still, knowing the next 60 seconds would determine whether she walked away whole or became another headline. Think you know what she did next? You don't. Because her next move is something most people could never do. I said step away. Are you deaf or just not listening? Brennan's voice carried, designed to perform, to humiliate, to establish dominance for the audience now turning to watch. Catalina took 2 steps back, hands raised to shoulder height, palms open. I'm stepping back. I'm complying. Steady. Clear. Respectful. It should have de-escalated. It didn't. Brennan's eyes scanned her car, her bags, her body, searching for justification he hadn't found yet, but was determined to create. What are you doing here? She was standing in front of a grocery store, with groceries, but she answered anyway. Shopping, loading my car. Brennan smirked, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Right, in a car like that, in this neighborhood. There it is, not a crime, not a call, just a black woman in an Audi, existing where someone decided she didn't belong. Heat rose in Catalina's chest, but her face stayed frozen. She'd learned this lesson at her mother's knee. Anger is a luxury you can't afford. Anger gets you hurt. Anger gets you arrested. Anger gives them the excuse they're looking for, so she stayed quiet. Hands visible. Let him talk. Let him perform for the cameras now turning toward them. Phones lifted. A man in a blue shirt recorded at waist level. A teenage girl angled hers from a Honda. Brennan either didn't notice or didn't care. He stepped closer, invading that space most people reserve for lovers or fights. You got ID? Catalina nodded slowly. Yes, in my purse. Front seat. Brennan's jaw tightened. Get it. Slowly. She moved like someone defusing a bomb, every gesture careful, visible, impossible to misinterpret. Opened the passenger door, reached for her purse, pulled out her wallet, handed over her license without a word. Brennan took it, glanced at it for half a second, then looked back at her with suspicion that had nothing to do with the ID. Catalina Volkov? He said her name like it was foreign, like it didn't belong. What kind of name is that? She didn't answer. The question wasn't real. It was a test, a probe, an invitation to give him ammunition. She refused. Silence stretched. A woman with 2 kids slowed, looked back. A man in a suit stopped near the entrance, phone already recording. The audience was growing, the evidence multiplying. Brennan handed the ID back but didn't step away. Where are you coming from? She blinked. The store, right there. She gestured to the Trader Joe's 20 feet away. Before that, her jaw tightened but her voice stayed level. My home. I left home, drove here, shopped, and now I'm loading my car. Is there a problem, officer? That last word, officer, was respectful, deliberate, a reminder she was following every rule. Brennan leaned in, one voice dropping just low enough that only she could hear. The problem is you're acting nervous. The problem is this doesn't add up. The problem is I don't like your attitude. Catalina's breath caught, but she didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't give him the reaction he wanted. She simply looked at him, eyes level, silence louder than any argument. And that silence, calm and unbreakable, made him angrier than words ever could. Drop a comment if you've ever had to stay quiet when everything inside you was screaming, because what happens next will shock you. Turn around, hands behind your back. Catalina's stomach dropped. Am I being detained? Brennan's expression hardened. You're being arrested. The words hit like a slap. Around them, murmurs grew louder. Phones lifted higher. A woman gasped. Catalina's voice stayed calm, but her pulse was screaming. Arrested for what? I haven't done anything. Brennan grabbed her wrist, rougher than necessary, and twisted her arm behind her back. Resisting. Suspicious activity. Failure to comply. All lies. Every word a fabrication built on bias that existed long before he pulled into this parking lot. The metal cuffs bit into her wrists, cold, tight, designed to humiliate. She didn't resist, didn't pull away, just let her body go still, let the injustice wash over her like ice water, knowing that fighting would only make it worse. Brennan leaned close as he tightened the cuffs, his breath hot against her ear. Should have been more cooperative. Then came the search. Hands patting down her sides, her pockets, her waistband. Public. Invasive. Unnecessary. Catalina stared straight ahead, jaw locked. My eyes fixed on the Trader Joe's sign in the distance. She wouldn't give him her tears, wouldn't give him her fear, wouldn't give him anything but silence. A man in the crowd shouted, "She wasn't doing anything." Brennan ignored him. A teenage girl yelled, "This is messed up." Brennan kept moving, kept performing his authority for an audience that was no longer on his side. He found nothing, no weapon, no drugs, no evidence of any crime, just a wallet, keys, and a phone. He held the phone up like it was suspicious, scrolled through the lock screen, then shoved it back in her pocket. "Let's go." He grabbed her upper arm and marched her toward the patrol car. She walked with her head up, shoulders back, refusing to be diminished even as strangers recorded her shame. The back door of the cruiser screeched open. Brennan placed his hand on her head and pushed her down into the seat. The space smelled like sweat, fear, and old coffee. Plastic seats cracked. The cage separating front from back felt like a verdict already rendered. Catalina sat perfectly still, hands cuffed behind her, fingers going numb. Through the window she could see people gathering. Phones still raised, a woman shaking her head in disgust, a man gesturing angrily, pointing at Brennan. She took a slow breath in through her nose, held it, released it through her mouth. "This isn't the first time I've been underestimated. It won't be the last, but it will be the most expensive mistake Derek Brennan ever makes." She didn't say it out loud, didn't need to. The truth had a way of revealing itself. Brennan climbed into the driver's seat, radioed dispatch, on and pulled out of the lot like he'd just made a righteous arrest instead of a career-ending error. Catalina watched the grocery store shrink in the rear window, watched her car, trunk still open, bag still sitting in the heat, disappear from view. She thought about the milk that would spoil, the ice cream that would melt, the routine shattered by a man who saw her skin before he ever saw her humanity. Her wedding ring pressed into her finger, metal against bone. A reminder of who she was beyond this moment. Nikolai didn't know yet. Didn't know his wife had been cuffed, searched, humiliated in broad daylight, but he would. And when he did, the world would shift. Not with violence, not with rage, but with something far more permanent, the kind of reckoning that doesn't need to be loud to be devastating. If you were in her position, would you stay silent or fight back? Comment now, because what happens next will make you rethink everything about power. Nikolai Volkov's phone rang during a meeting with men who controlled shipping routes from Vladivostok to New Jersey. He glanced at the screen. Precinct, Central Division. His entire body went still. The room fell silent. Everyone recognized that look. The one that came before people disappeared. He answered on the second ring. "Volkov. Mr. Volkov, this is Sergeant Novak. Your wife. Is she hurt?" His voice was ice. Absolute zero. "No, sir. She was arrested. A misunderstanding. We're handling it now." Nikolai stood. The chair scraped back. Every man in the room stopped breathing. "What precinct?" "Central, sir. But I want to assure you..." The line went dead. Nikolai's hand tightened around the phone until the screen cracked. Then he looked at the 5 men seated around the mahogany table, men who ran empires who'd killed for less than respect, who understood exactly one language: power. Meeting's over. His voice was calm, conversational, but his eyes promised violence. Victor, his second in command, stood immediately. "What do you need?" 3 lawyers, the best. At Central Division in 15 minutes. Victor nodded and pulled out his phone, already dialing. Nikolai walked to the window overlooking the city. His city, the one he controlled from the shadows where his word carried more weight than any elected official's. Someone had touched his wife, put hands on her, humiliated her, treated her like she was nothing, that someone had just signed their own death warrant. not literally. Nikolai wasn't a monster, but he didn't need to kill Derek Brennan. He just needed to erase him. Remove him from existence so thoroughly that in 6 months, no one would remember his name. No job, no career, no future. Just a cautionary tale whispered in locker rooms about the cost of crossing the wrong woman. Nikolai's phone buzzed, a text from Victor. Lawyers en route, Morrison and Tate, Chen and Associates, Volkov Private Counsel, all confirmed. Nikolai typed back, "Tell them I want everything. Body cam, witness statements, his personnel file, every complaint ever filed. I want his career dissected and displayed for everyone to see." 3 dots appeared, then, "Done." Nikolai slipped the phone into his pocket and allowed himself a single deep breath. Then he made another call. This one to someone who owed him a favor. Someone in the mayor's office who understood that debts in Nikolai's world weren't negotiable. The call lasted 45 seconds. When he hung up, the wheels were already in motion. Not revenge, justice. The kind that comes with documentation, legal pressure, and consequences that couldn't be appealed or overturned. The kind that was permanent. Nikolai looked at Victor. "I need to go get my wife." Victor nodded. "Car's ready." As Nikolai walked toward the elevator, one of the men at the table, a Bratva captain named Dmitri, spoke quietly. "What do you want us to do about the cop?" Nikolai paused, turned. His expression was empty, devoid of emotion. "Nothing. I don't want him touched. I don't want him threatened. I want him to wake up every day for the rest of his life, knowing that he destroyed himself, that no one saved him, that the system he trusted turned on him the moment he stepped out of line." He stepped into the elevator. Just before the doors closed, he added, "I want him to know it was her, that Catalina Volkov, the woman he thought was nothing, was everything, and that touching her was the worst decision he ever made." The doors closed, and the reckoning began. Think Nikolai's just going to yell and threaten? Keep watching. Because what he does next is something most men could never pull off, and it doesn't involve a single act of violence. The precinct smelled like burnt coffee and bad decisions. Catalina was walked through the side entrance, still cuffed, still silent. Officers glanced up. A few looked away quickly. One muttered something under his breath. Brennan marched her through the bullpen like a trophy, chest puffed with pride. They reached the processing desk where Officer Linda Morales sat, fingers poised over a keyboard, eyes tired from a double shift. "What do we have?" Morales asked without looking up. Brennan cleared his throat. "Suspicious activity. Resisting. Possible intent to flee." Morales finally looked up, her gaze moving from Brennan to Catalina. There was a flicker of something. Doubt, maybe. Recognition. But she said nothing. Just gestured toward the bench. "Sit her down. I'll process." Catalina was guided to a metal bench bolted to the floor. Brennan removed the cuffs. She rubbed her wrists slowly, red marks already forming where the metal had pressed too tight. She didn't complain. Didn't ask for water. Didn't ask for a phone call. Yet. She just sat. Hands folded. Eyes forward. Waiting. Morales typed slowly, pulling up the intake form. Full name." Catalina's voice was steady. "Catalina Volkov." Morales paused, just for a second. Her fingers hovered over the keys. Then she kept typing. "Address." Catalina recited it. A gated community in the northern part of the city, the kind of neighborhood that didn't usually produce suspects. Morales typed it in, expression neutral. "Date of birth," Catalina answered. Morales entered it. Then came the part that changed everything. "Spell the last name for me." Catalina spoke each letter clearly. "Volkov." Morales typed it in. Hit enter. And then the screen did something unexpected. It flagged. A small red icon appeared next to the name. Then another. Then a third. Morales leaned forward, squinting at the monitor. Her mouse hovered over the flags. She clicked one. Her eyes widened. Just slightly. She clicked another. Her jaw tightened. She glanced at Catalina, then back at the screen, then over her shoulder toward the sergeant's office. Brennan stood a few feet away, arms crossed, oblivious. "What's the holdup?" he asked. Morales didn't answer. She picked up the desk phone and dialed an internal extension. 2 rings. "Sergeant Novak?" "Yeah, it's Morales. I need you at processing. Now." Her tone was calm, but the urgency underneath was unmistakable. She hung up. Typed something else. Hit enter again. The system pulled up a secondary file. A case file. A federal file. Names appeared. Dates. Connections. And at the center of it all, one name that made every officer in the building pause when they heard it. Nikolai Volkov. The air in the room shifted. It wasn't dramatic. Wasn't loud. But it was real. Sergeant Novak arrived less than a minute later. He was 52, barrel-chested, with 30 years on the force and a reputation for knowing everyone worth knowing in the city's power structure. He leaned over Morales' shoulder and read the screen. His expression didn't change, but his breathing did. Slower. Heavier. He looked at Catalina, then at Brennan, then back at the screen. "Where did you pick her up?" Novak asked, voice carefully controlled. Brennan stepped forward, still confident. "Trader Joe's parking lot. She was acting suspicious, refused to cooperate." Novak's eyes stayed on the screen. "Refused to cooperate how?" Brennan hesitated. "She was evasive, had an attitude." Novak finally looked at him, and there was no pride in his eyes, no congratulations, just a slow, creeping realization that something had gone very, very wrong. Did you run her plates before you approached?" Brennan's confidence cracked. "I didn't need to. I saw—" Novak held up a hand. "Did you run her plates?" Silence. Brennan didn't answer. He didn't need to. The answer was written all over his face. Novak stepped away from the desk and motioned for Brennan to follow. They moved to the corner of the room, voices low but not low enough. Catalina could hear fragments. "Do you have any idea?" "Federal interest. Connected. Lawyer on speed dial." Brennan's posture changed, shoulders hunched, hands moved from his belt to his pockets. The swagger was gone. Novak returned to the desk, face unreadable. He looked at Morales. "Get her a phone. Now." Morales nodded and handed Catalina a desk phone, cord stretched across the counter. Catalina took it without a word. Dialed a number from memory. I pressed it to her ear. 1 ring. 2. Then a voice. Deep, calm, familiar. "Lena?" Her husband's voice was quiet, but it carried weight that could move mountains. She didn't explain. Didn't dramatize. Just stated facts. "I was arrested. Trader Joe's on Maple. I'm at the precinct now. No charges yet. Officer Brennan." She said the name clearly, deliberately, making sure it was heard. On the other end, there was silence. Then, "I'll handle it." The line went dead. Catalina handed the phone back to Morales. She didn't smile, didn't gloat, just returned to her seat and folded her hands in her lap again, the same way she'd been sitting before, but the room had changed. Think one phone call can't change everything? Keep watching, because in the next 90 seconds, this cop's entire world collapses. Within 15 minutes of Catalina's phone call, the phones started ringing. Not 1, not 2, 5 different lines, all at once. The bullpen erupted in a low buzz of confusion. Officers picked up, listened, hung up, exchanged looks. Novak's desk phone rang. He answered, listened for 10 seconds, and his face went pale. He hung up and walked directly to the captain's office without a word. The door closed. Through the frosted glass, 2 silhouettes could be seen. One standing, one sitting. The standing one was gesturing. The sitting one was very, very still. 2 minutes later, the door opened. Captain Raymond Hale stepped out. 58. Gray-haired. The kind of face that had seen every type of case the city could produce. He looked at Catalina, then at Brennan, then at Morales. "Uncuff her, now." Morales moved quickly. "She's not cuffed, sir. She's just waiting." Hale's jaw tightened. "Then stop waiting. Get her belongings, get her out of processing, and somebody get me the body cam footage from Officer Brennan's unit, right now. Brennan stepped forward, voice shaking. Captain, I was just... Hale turned on him, and the room went silent. You were just what, Brennan? Doing your job? Protecting the community? Arresting a woman for loading groceries? Brennan's mouth opened. No words came. Hale didn't wait for an answer. He turned to Catalina, tone shifting. Professional, careful, almost apologetic. Mrs. Volkov, I apologize for the inconvenience. You're free to go. We'll have someone drive you back to your vehicle. Catalina stood slowly. She didn't say, thank you. Didn't accept the apology. Just looked at Hale with the same calm, unreadable expression she'd worn since Brennan first put his hands on her. I'll find my own way. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. She walked toward the exit. Every officer in the room watched her go. No one stopped her. No one spoke. The door closed behind her, and the silence that followed was deafening. Outside, on the precinct steps, Catalina pulled out her phone and sent a single text. I'm out. No charges. He made a mistake. The reply came instantly. I know. It's being handled. She slipped the phone back into her pocket and started walking. Behind her, inside that building, the consequences were already unfolding, but she didn't need to be there to see it. She'd seen it before. Power didn't need to be loud. It just needed to be inevitable. Back inside, Hale turned to Brennan, voice low and cold. My office. Now. As they walked away, Morales leaned back in her chair and exhaled slowly. She looked at the screen still glowing with Catalina's file, at the red flag still blinking, at the name that had just turned a routine arrest into a department-wide crisis. She muttered under her breath, You arrested Nikolai Volkov's wife. Another officer nearby overheard and winced. He didn't know? Morales shook her head. He didn't even run the plates. The officer whistled low. He's done. Morales didn't disagree. She closed the file, cleared the screen, and reached for her coffee. It was cold. She drank it anyway. Want to know what really happens when you cross someone with that kind of power? Stay tuned, because the lawyers haven't even shown up yet. 18 minutes after Catalina's phone call, 3 black SUVs pulled up to the precinct. Not sirens, not lights, just quiet, expensive authority. The kind that announced itself through presence alone. The first lawyer through the door was Margaret Morrison, senior partner at Morrison & Tate, a woman who'd made district attorneys cry during depositions and won settlements that bankrupted departments. She was 60, impeccably dressed, and moved through the precinct like she owned it. Behind her, David Chen, civil rights litigator, known for taking cases the ACLU wouldn't touch and winning them anyway. And finally, Robert Kane, private counsel whose name didn't appear on any website, whose clients were never photographed, whose cases never went to trial because they were settled before the ink dried. All 3 walked directly to the front desk. Morales looked up and froze. Morrison smiled, polite, professional, deadly. We're here representing Catalina Volkov. We understand she was unlawfully detained approximately 40 minutes ago. We'd like to speak with Captain Hale immediately. It wasn't a request. Morales picked up the phone. Captain, the lawyers are here. Hale appeared 30 seconds later, face carefully neutral. Gentlemen, ma'am, Mrs. Volkov has already been released. There's been a misunderstanding. Morrison cut him off. A misunderstanding that resulted in our client being handcuffed, searched, and detained without probable cause. We'll need copies of the arrest report, body cam footage, and Officer Brennan's personnel file, immediately. Hale's jaw tightened. That's an ongoing investigation. Then we'll file a public records request and a civil suit. And we'll have a press conference scheduled for tomorrow morning detailing how your department racially profiles innocent civilians. Morrison's smile never wavered. Or you can cooperate now, and we can handle this quietly. The threat was clear. Hale looked at the 3 lawyers, recognizing the kind of firepower that could dismantle careers, drain budgets, and turn a single incident into a national scandal. He made the only choice he could. "I'll have everything ready within the hour." Morrison nodded. "We'll wait." 20 minutes later, the body cam footage played on a monitor in Captain Hale's office. All three lawyers watched in silence. Margaret Morrison took notes. David Chen leaned forward, jaw tight. Robert Kane's expression never changed, but his fingers drummed once against his briefcase. A tell. When the footage reached the moment Brennan leaned close to Catalina and said, "Should have been more cooperative," Chen paused it. "Run that back." The footage replayed. Chen turned to Hale. "Your officer just created liability that's going to cost this city 7 figures. Minimum." Hale said nothing, because he knew Chen was right. Morrison closed her notepad. "Here's what's going to happen. Officer Brennan will be terminated, effective immediately. His personnel file will be flagged to prevent him from working in law enforcement again. The department will implement mandatory bias training, and will negotiate a settlement that reflects the severity of this violation." Hale's hands tightened on his desk. "I'll need to consult with the city attorney." "You'll do that," Morrison said smoothly. "But understand, we have video evidence, eyewitness testimony, and a client with significant legal resources. This case will not go well for you, so I suggest you make this easy." She stood. The other 2 lawyers followed. "We'll be in touch tomorrow with our terms. Have a good evening, Captain." They walked out, leaving Hale sitting alone in his office, staring at the frozen frame on his monitor. Catalina Volkov, hands cuffed, face calm, eyes unbroken. And he knew, with absolute certainty, that Derek Brennan's career was over. Think lawyers just argue in court? Wrong. Keep watching, because the real power move is about to happen, and it doesn't involve a single courtroom. Derek Brennan sat in Captain Hale's office, union rep beside him, both silent as Hale laid out the future. "You're on administrative leave effective immediately. Full investigation. Internal Affairs will review the body cam footage, witness statements, and your arrest report. You'll surrender your badge and service weapon tonight." Brennan's face went pale. "Captain, I was just doing my job. I saw something suspicious." Hale cut him off. "You saw a black woman loading groceries and decided she was a threat. That's not police work, Brennan. That's profiling. And it's about to cost this department a lawsuit we can't afford to lose." The union rep shifted uncomfortably. "We'll need to review the footage before we make any statements." Hale nodded. "You do that. But I've already seen enough. And so have the attorneys representing Mrs. Volkov." He let that sink in, then added, 3 firms, Brennan. 3. For a woman who was loading groceries, that tell you anything?" Brennan didn't answer. He couldn't, because the truth was already becoming unbearably clear. He hadn't just arrested the wrong person. He'd arrested someone protected by forces he didn't understand and couldn't fight. The union rep cleared his throat. What are we looking at here?" Hale leaned back in his chair. "Best case? He resigns quietly and we settle out of court. Worst case? Termination, civil suit, and national media attention that makes us look like the department that arrests innocent women for shopping." Brennan's hands trembled. "I didn't know." "You didn't check," Hale snapped. "You didn't run her plates, didn't verify a complaint, didn't have probable cause. You just assumed. And that assumption is about to destroy your career." The room fell silent. The union rep spoke carefully. "We'll need time to review." Hale shook his head. "There's no time. The lawyers want a response by tomorrow. And trust me, you don't want this going to trial." He slid a folder across the desk. "This is your personnel file, Brennan. 7 complaints. 7. All dismissed, all ignored, but together, they paint a picture of an officer who's been operating with impunity for years." Brennan stared at the folder like it was a bomb. "That's not fair." "Fair?" Hale's voice was ice. "You arrested a woman for loading groceries. You handcuffed her, searched her, humiliated her in public. And now, you want to talk about fair? Brennan had no answer. The meeting ended 10 minutes later. Badge surrendered. Gun turned in. Career in limbo. Brennan walked out of the precinct in civilian clothes, the weight of what he'd done finally settling in. At home, his wife asked questions he couldn't answer. What happened? It's complicated. Are you in trouble? I don't know. His kids noticed his mood, stopped asking him to play, ate dinner in silence. His phone buzzed. Text from a buddy on the force. Heard what happened. You okay? Brennan didn't respond, because he wasn't okay, and he wouldn't be for a very long time. 6 weeks later, the settlement came. Not a trial, not a public spectacle, just a closed-door negotiation between the city's attorneys and the law firms representing Catalina. The amount was never disclosed, but sources within the city's legal department whispered it was substantial. High 6 figures, possibly more. The terms were equally significant. Brennan would be terminated. His personnel file would be flagged. He would never work in law enforcement again, anywhere in the state. The department would implement mandatory bias training. Body cam policies would be reviewed and strengthened. An independent review board would be established to investigate future complaints of racial profiling. The city didn't admit wrongdoing, but the settlement spoke louder than any admission ever could. They paid because they knew they'd lose. They paid because the evidence was irrefutable. They paid because Catalina Volkov had been right, and Derek Brennan had been catastrophically wrong. The news broke quietly. A single paragraph in the local paper. Officer involved in controversial arrest, no longer with department. No details. No drama. Just a career ended and a life permanently altered. Think this is just about one cop? It's not. Keep watching, because what happens next proves that consequences are real, and they don't forget. So Catalina Volkov wasn't born into power. She was born into survival. The daughter of immigrants who crossed borders with nothing but hope and a willingness to work jobs no one else wanted. Her father cleaned office buildings at night. Her mother worked double shifts at a garment factory. They lived in a 2-bedroom apartment where sirens were background noise and opportunity was something you fought for, not something you were given. Catalina learned early. The world doesn't owe you anything. Respect has to be earned. Silence is sometimes the smartest response when words can be weaponized against you. She watched her parents navigate a system designed to keep them small, and she learned to move through it with the same quiet determination. By 16, she was fluent in 3 languages, working part-time at a legal aid clinic, and applying to colleges her guidance counselor said were out of reach. She got into every single one, not because of luck, because she refused to accept no as a permanent answer. That discipline, that refusal to break under pressure, became the foundation of everything she built. She met Nikolai when she was 24, working as a paralegal for a firm that handled complex litigation. He came in as a client, facing a contract dispute that threatened one of his early business ventures. She was assigned to assist with the case. And within the first meeting, she saw something most people missed. He wasn't just smart. He was strategic, calculated, patient. The kind of man who thought 5 moves ahead and never let emotion dictate decisions. They worked together for 6 months. The case was won. And somewhere in the process of late-night document reviews and courtroom preparations, a partnership formed that went beyond professional. He saw her strength. She saw his discipline. They recognized in each other the same relentless drive to succeed, to protect what mattered, to never be underestimated again. When he proposed, it wasn't romantic in the traditional sense. They were in his office, reviewing acquisition documents at 2 a.m. Catalina was exhausted, hair pulled back, reading glasses slipping down her nose. Nikolai set down his pen and said, "Marry me." She looked up. "What?" "Marry me. Be my partner. In everything." Not a question. A proposal. An offer. A promise. She studied his face, those cold gray eyes that softened only for her, that jaw that could cut glass, that quiet intensity that made powerful men nervous. Why?" she asked. "Because you're the only person I trust, the only one who sees me and doesn't flinch, the only one strong enough to stand beside me when the world tries to tear us down." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I'll marry you on one condition. Name it. You never ask me to be smaller, quieter, less than I am. Nikolai smiled, rare, genuine, devastating. I wouldn't dream of it. They were married 3 months later. Small ceremony. No press, just family and the people who mattered. And from that day forward, Catalina Volkov became something the world didn't expect. A woman married to power who never let it define her. She ran a nonprofit that provided legal resources to immigrant families navigating the same systems her parents once struggled through. She sat on the board of 2 charitable organizations. She mentored young women from underserved communities, helping them apply to colleges, prepare for interviews, and advocate for themselves in spaces that didn't always welcome them. She did all of this quietly, without press releases or public recognition, because the work mattered more than the credit. Her strength didn't come from her marriage. It came from her history, from every time she'd been underestimated and proved people wrong, from every door slammed in her face that she found another way through, from every moment she chose dignity over anger, strategy over emotion, patience over impulse. That's why she stayed calm in the parking lot. That's why she didn't argue with Brennan. That's why her silence unsettled him more than any protest could have. Because she knew something he didn't. Power isn't loud. Power is knowing when to speak and when to let the system destroy itself. If you've ever had to stay calm when everything inside you was screaming, drop a comment. Because this story isn't just hers. It's ours. 3 months after the arrest, Catalina stood in her kitchen making breakfast, the same kitchen she'd left that Tuesday morning to buy groceries, the same routine, the same quiet. Nikolai walked in, hair still damp from the shower, and wrapped his arms around her waist from behind. "You're up early," he murmured against her neck. "Couldn't sleep." He kissed her shoulder. "Still thinking about it?" She cracked eggs into a pan, watching them sizzle. "Sometimes." Nikolai turned her around gently, hands framing her face. "He's gone, Lena. Terminated. Flagged. He'll never wear a badge again." "I know." "Then why?" "Because he's not the only one," she said quietly. "He was just the one who got caught. There are hundreds more. Thousands. And most of them never face consequences." Nikolai's jaw tightened. "You want me to—" "No." She placed her hand over his. "I don't want you to fix it with power or money or influence. I want the system to fix it. I want policies to change. I want accountability to be the default, not the exception." He studied her face, this woman who'd married into a world of violence and control but refused to let it corrupt her. "You're too good for this world," he said softly. She smiled. "Maybe. But I'm stuck with it. So I might as well try to make it better." He kissed her. Slow. Deep. The kind that reminded her why she'd said yes 3 years ago. When he pulled back, his eyes were serious. "I'm proud of you. For how you handled it. For not breaking." Catalina touched his cheek. "I learned from the best." "Your mother?" "My mother," she confirmed. "She survived worse with nothing. I survived this with everything. It would have been shameful if I hadn't." Meanwhile, across town, Derek Brennan sat in his living room, scrolling through job listings for the 100th time. Security guard. Rejected. Private investigator. Rejected. Loss prevention. Rejected. Every background check came back flagged. Every interview ended the same way. "We'll be in touch." They never were. His wife had taken a full-time job at a call center. His kids qualified for reduced lunch at school. The mortgage was 3 months behind. And every night, lying in bed, he replayed that afternoon. The woman in the Audi, the calm in her eyes. The phone call that destroyed everything. He'd convinced himself he was right, that she'd been suspicious, that he'd been doing his job, but the footage didn't lie, and neither did the witnesses. He'd been wrong, and that wrongness had cost him everything. The broader lesson settled into the public consciousness slowly. The case was never a national headline, but it was a local conversation. People talked, debated, used it as evidence in larger arguments about policing, accountability, and systemic bias. Policies changed. Training was revised. Officers were reminded that a badge is a responsibility, not a shield. Not because of outrage, because of evidence. And that evidence, captured on body cams, recorded on phones, documented in legal filings, became part of the permanent record. A reminder that actions have consequences. That power, when abused, doesn't protect you. It destroys you. Think one person can't make a difference? You're wrong. Because Catalina didn't just win her case, she changed the system. And that's the real victory. 6 months after the settlement, a young woman named Maria Santos sat in her criminal justice class at the local community college. The professor was discussing a case study, an unnamed woman arrested for loading groceries, the subsequent lawsuit, and the policy changes that followed. Maria listened, heart pounding, because she knew that story. She'd been there. 17 years old, working the register at Trader Joe's, watching through the window as a cop handcuffed a woman who'd done nothing wrong. She'd filmed it on her phone, uploaded it, and watched as it spread. Not viral, not explosive, but steady, persistent, undeniable. That video became evidence. That evidence became justice. And that justice became the reason Maria was sitting in this classroom, pursuing a degree in criminal justice, determined to be the kind of officer who protected people instead of terrorizing them. The professor finished the lecture and asked, "What's the takeaway here?" Maria raised her hand. That accountability only works when people demand it, when they document it, when they refuse to look away. The professor nodded. Exactly. One person with a camera phone. One woman who stayed calm under pressure. One legal team that refused to settle quietly. Together, they created change. Maria smiled, because she'd been part of that change. A small part, maybe, but a part nonetheless. Meanwhile, in a boardroom across the city, Nikolai sat through another meeting, this one with Port Authority officials discussing shipping contracts. His phone buzzed, a text from Catalina. Just got word. The new bias training program starts next month. Independent review board approved. It's happening. Nikolai allowed himself a rare smile. Typed back, "Proud of you. Always." 3 dots appeared. Then, "It wasn't just me. It was everyone. But thank you." He pocketed the phone and returned his attention to the meeting. But his mind stayed on her, this woman who'd walked into his life as a paralegal and became the most powerful force he'd ever known. Not because she commanded armies or controlled empires, but because she changed systems. Quietly, strategically, permanently. And that, Nikolai understood, was the most dangerous kind of power. The kind that couldn't be bought or intimidated. The kind that lasted. Back at the precinct, Officer Linda Morales trained a new recruit. A young woman fresh out of the academy, eager, nervous, determined to do good. "First rule," Morales said, pulling up a training module on her computer. "Always verify. Always check. Never assume." The recruit nodded, taking notes. Morales clicked play on a body cam video, the one that had ended Derek Brennan's career. This is what happens when you don't. The recruit watched, eyes widening as the footage played out. When it ended, she looked at Morales. What happened to him? Terminated. Flagged. He'll never work in law enforcement again. And the woman? Morales smiled slightly. She's fine. Living her life. Probably doesn't think about this anymore. But the recruit could see the truth in Morales' eyes. Catalina Volkov thought about it. Not with anger. Not with bitterness. But with resolve. Because every woman who walked through a parking lot, every person who loaded groceries, every civilian who encountered police, they deserved better. And Catalina had made sure they got it. Still think one person can't change the system? Drop a comment if this story made you rethink what power really looks like. So here's the question you need to ask yourself. What would you have done? If you were standing in that parking lot, hands pressed against cold metal, strangers recording your humiliation, would you have stayed silent like Catalina? Or would you have argued, demanded answers, let the anger rise until it gave them the excuse they were looking for? It's easy to say you'd stay calm. It's harder to do it when your heart is pounding, when injustice is happening in real time, when every instinct is screaming to fight back. Catalina chose silence not because she was weak, but because she was strategic. She understood that in that moment her words wouldn't save her. Only evidence would, only time would, only the truth, captured and undeniable, would shift the balance of power back in her direction. Derek Brennan's mistake wasn't arresting the wrong woman. It was believing his badge made him untouchable, that his assumptions were justified, that his authority was absolute. He learned the hard way that power is conditional. And when you violate the principles that grant it, the consequences are inevitable. Not loud, not immediate, but inevitable. So the next time you see someone being underestimated, dismissed, or disrespected, remember this: the quietest person in the room might be the one who changes everything. Not by force, not by volume, but by refusing to accept injustice as permanent. That's the real power, and it belongs to anyone brave enough to claim it. She was loading groceries when the sirens stopped her heart. That's how this started. With the ordinary colliding with the unthinkable. With a Tuesday afternoon that should have been forgettable becoming the kind of moment that reshapes lives. But here's what the story really reveals. Power doesn't always announce itself. It doesn't always wear a badge or carry a title. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's a woman standing in a parking lot, refusing to give the world her fear. Sometimes it's the knowledge that truth, when captured, becomes evidence that no amount of authority can suppress. Catalina didn't need to shout to be heard. She didn't need to fight to win. She just needed to exist, with dignity intact, and let the system reveal its own failures. And it did. What would you do in her position? Drop your answer in the comments, and if you haven't subscribed yet, what's stopping you? Every story we tell challenges how you see the world. Don't miss the next one. Hit subscribe right now. Because the people who stay silent aren't always weak. Sometimes they're the ones who see what's coming long before anyone else does.